Trump is looking at these guys just like he did ISIS and everything else, and they are at least that bad. They might be worse because there is no code at all amongst them. But if you go in, because I've been waiting for every morning for 10 weeks, all these people wake up and they're like, what happened to him last night? And he's dead, and just every day people are waking up dead. But I'm wondering now if that's even a good idea for us to send in special forces, if it's just breaking them up even more into these little teeny death squads.
Okay, that's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought it up. What we've done to the Gulf Cartel, and we've broken them into little itty-bitty, teeny-tiny death squads, right? What we have done, though, is broken their power in Mexico. Their ability to control that central government, to have influence over it, is very small.
But wait, so let me stop and let's spend a minute on the government, because you can't do the things these organizations are doing without serious connections to the government. And I mean, it's obvious when you have a local politician, he's like, I'm going to run against the cartels. I'm going to clean this up. He's dead. Everyone who's on his team is dead. Everybody who even was supporting him, they're all dead. You clearly, when you have the next candidate up, he's clearly at least tolerant of the cartels. So how do you clean that up? I mean, how deep does this go? Is it all of it?
So Mexico has, 5 years ago, I would have said they had 31 states in the federal district, right? Kind of like their DC, Mexico City. I think now it's considered a state, so it's 32 states, right?
Right.
More than half of that territory is under the control of cartels. And when
literal
I say,
control.
Like literal control. So in the United States, if someone is in trouble, we might send, the FBI or the ATF to go get them, right? In Mexico, they can't do that. In Mexico, they have to send in their elite Marines. They have to send in like hundreds of soldiers and armored vehicles to go and get someone if they want them. And that's even then that it's very rare. Rarely is it successful, right? There's usually the cartels are using drone attacks. It starts to resemble a smaller version of Ukraine and Russia right now. So it's under their control. So it's very tricky. I think later on in this discussion we'll probably get more in detail about, maybe we will, about the problems that the U.S. has in doing things in Mexico. But to make a long story short, years ago, as in a year ago, maybe even up to a year ago, the way that people in the intelligence community and in the law enforcement community in the United States described it to me is they said, when we have law enforcement or intelligence, priorities, the State Department would always say, hey, wait a minute, you need to balance your law enforcement and intelligence priorities with the State Department's diplomatic concerns.
Oh, man.
And so you got to think about what the U.S. government does.
It's horrifying. That's like Vietnam.
So this is what happens is people leave D.C., they go to Mexico for a 2-year assignment or so, right? They take a sheet of paper and they write out their priorities. And they say, okay, here's what I'm going to accomplish while I'm here. And after I accomplish these things and I leave, I can go to Honolulu or wherever I want to go, right? Some, Southeast Pacific island or something, because I took this dangerous assignment. They have to work with local partners, with Mexicans, to get these priorities done. And they start to do it. The U.S. government starts to go after a particular cartel boss. And then all of the people that the State Department's working with and depending on say, well, you need to back off that guy. It's going to cause problems for us. Why don't you go after this guy instead?
This is Al Capone.
Absolutely. So to what you said a minute ago, what can the U.S. do? If the U.S. goes after them, does it break them up and turn them into, is it like a hydra? Do you chop the head off and more heads come at you? I think that the U.S. government doesn't really need to do that. I think the U.S. government needs to look at the reality of Mexico. Mexico, everything is for sale. If you're dirty and you throw money around, you have political power and you can get things done. But if you're the U.S. government and you throw money around, you can get things done as well. I think that the U.S. government should fund groups in Mexico to take out or help with these bad guys, like they just did. They got a Sinaloa guy named El Mayo, and it turns out that El Mayo was kidnapped by another cartel and then flown here, right, to the U.S. Well, obviously, someone in the U.S. government was working with these other bad guys to do this, and I think that kind of thing is what's going to happen more. I think that it's probably.
Will that even slow things down?
Yeah, because you have to. This is one of those tricky things, right? Where there are a lot of folks on the left who cover cartels. They don't cover them like we do, but they still cover stuff going on in Mexico, right? And when they cover it, I say a lot, there's a few of them. A few of them I respect, Ian Grillo, and there's a few folks I really respect, and I read their work. But they come from it from a very liberal. It kind of reminds me of talking about home invasions in Los Angeles, right? If you asked me how to deal with home invasions in Los Angeles, I'm going to have a very different perspective than Nancy Pelosi would have, right? And or even their current governor.
Right.
And they look at it in this bizarre way. It's like, well, this violence is going to happen if we do this. It's going to cause these short-term problems. So maybe we just leave it alone and learn to cooperate with them and live with them. I'm like, no, that's not how we do things, right? Like what we do is we do what we have to do, and then we worry about the next step afterwards if the only thing we can do is right before our face, right? So you take the step, you break them up, you minimize their federal power, their national power, and you keep breaking them up. And then if they turn into 5 groups, you break them up. But every time they divide, they're smaller than they were before, and you break their power.
That's just going to take long term.
And we can't do long term in this country. We have 4 to 8 years.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's all we have.
Right.
Yeah, that's all we have. I'd say reach across the aisle. The way that I talk about.
Even some of the Republicans, they just don't care. And I think it's because I've seen some of the pictures that networks didn't allow me to put on the air. I've seen the bowling alleys with the heads in the bowling alleys. You know what I mean? I've seen the heads on the pikes on the side of the street. This cremation story that just came out a few weeks ago.
It's horrifying.
Is horrifying. Horrifying. I don't think people really understand, because they're like, oh yeah, spring break, my kids are going to Mexico. Don't go to Mexico.
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. It's not the Mexico it used to be.
Now, okay, Glenn, imagine, and maybe I'm tugging on heartstrings for all the viewers a little, but that's okay because it's real. Imagine being someone who's a good person, right? You're a father. You have daughters, you have a son, you're probably impoverished, but imagine that you live under this, right? You live with, when the local cartel comes to get you, it's not people in masks coming to get you, it's the state police, because the state police work for that cartel, right? That is the part of the cartel. That's their enforcement, is their own mechanisms of government. Imagine you live under that. And no one in the world tells your story. No one in the world knows that you live under that. They kind of do, but not really, right? And imagine that the only hope you have is that people in the United States tell your story and make what's happening to you matter. Make people, just put it in everyone's head, right?
So tell me one of those stories.
Well, what I was getting at those is that on the left, they're afraid to report on what's going on in these communities because they're afraid that in their minds They think they're reinforcing a racist right of center narrative, right? And they're afraid to report on it because if they do report on it, they think it's going to benefit Republican Party, or it's going to make brown communities look bad. And so in the name of doing the best for these people, they just keep them silent and they refuse to tell what's going on, you know? And on the right, a lot of people have refused because they're like, well, you're just bringing sympathy to those people. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
If I were on the other side of the border, I completely understand. I'm taking my family and getting across the border.
That's what I would do.
Right. Yeah. And I completely understand the plight. I don't understand our unwillingness to move. I mean, for decades. This is not a new problem. This is getting worse and worse and worse and worse because we don't do anything about it. We don't demand anything be done about it. And you sit there and you look at it and you're like, I think the average person in Mexico, I'm living in one of those towns, completely run. And everybody knows it. And my mayor was killed. The person that wanted to replace him was shot. His wife and kids, they were shot. Somebody else was shot, all against the cartels. All of those guys were wiped out. I shut my mouth. I look for a way out for my family. So that's the reality. But if we actually would step in, because their government is corrupt, if we actually looked at them like we did ISIS, the people of Mexico would embrace us, would they not?